It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. It's Feedback Friday. Mortimer's here. Feedback Friday. Mortimer has become very popular, kind of like a mascot. It is not quite winter yet, so we are still in a deranged opossum fall. But this was not a deranged week. This was some good comments. I wasn't sure how the men's stuff this week was gonna go, and so I was like, yeah, look at the comments, but it was pretty good. International Men's Day was pretty raw this year for a lot of people, so it's nice to be able to offer some content that actually creates like the ability for guys to talk in the comments, which was good. Like, there was a lot of really cool sharing. And before I get to that, I'll do the help support this channel. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Yeah, people needed extra time this week. What I was basically hearing, I heard I'm angry a lot. And it was, alone being able to admit to someone you're angry these days is, I think, actually a pretty big thing. The frustration of not being able to have these conversations, because it's like International Men's Day. You don't need it. We don't need International Cupcake Day either. Most of the international days that are designated and recognized, we don't need. We don't need International Waffles Day. I'm sure there's an International Bananas Day. I'm sure, we don't need these days. They're just agreed upon for being useful. So that is not an accurate standard, first of all. But let's get to your comments instead of complaining, because, I can do what I can here. I can't move the world, but I can provide a better corner of it, right? So I can't believe I didn't make the miserable pile of secrets joke about what is a man. But lots of people in the comments did, so the joke got covered. And I like the people that did the complete quote with, but enough talk, have at you. Well done. Walk Like a Man jokes from the Four Seasons, the Four Top single. Appreciate the jokes. They're on to the serious comments. Being man enough by so-called societal expectations for many does feel like a state of being on the ball while being punished. So many just stop and do their own thing in one way or another. Not all ways are healthy. I personally care more about living the best I can rather than living based on the expectations of people. Expectations, that was the word, sorry. Based on living on the expectations of people never interact with. Or people who have generational scarring without noticing or doing anything about it. That generational scarring is an excellent point. A lot of this stuff does connect to that. This comment made me realize something that I have been watching myself to not do. So this was unintentionally validating. Something I've noticed is for a lot of men, manhood has to be proven not only to oneself, that is a 19-year-old wondering if he is now a man and not a boy, also to the other men around him. For example, people who go to college are referred to as kids, even though 99% of the people going to college are legally considered an adult. This can be a good and bad thing. First, the bad, if a guy cannot prove that he is a man, at least to himself, he is more likely to engage in self-destructive behavior to prove he's a man. The good, if a guy is able to prove that he's a man, he can be more flexible in how he relates to others and express himself, since he has that security of knowing. And it was the referring to college students as kids. That's something I have tried very hard to watch. I still slip sometimes, but yeah, they're legal adults. It's kind of condescending, or it can seem condescending to call them kids. So, all right. But studies bear out the comment about if a guy proves sufficiently that he's a man, He is more flexible in how he relates to others. People who are, I hate the term low status, but people who are more on the fringes of an identity group, that's where marginalized comes from, are more likely to relate to and defend the kind of stereotypical behaviors of that identity group. Even if they're negative stereotypes, they'll go to bat for them. Just dropping that fact in there, not because backing up the commenter, not saying that's right or wrong, just saying it is. I wish we could do more of that. It's not right or wrong, just saying it is. Moving on. All right. Not sure. This one's long, but a lot of the what is a man talk, apart from a man being a part of secrets, honestly, just again, all the man box rhetoric, all the men don't cry, men don't like pink stuff, men are super stoic talk again and again and again. Really, all the talk about manhood, at least the bunk the snake oil salesman peddle, is just romanticized misery. The idea that a real manhood is basically being repeatedly put through an emotional meat grinder and somehow coming out a hardened warrior instead of instilling valuable wisdoms or a sense of responsibility. That's honestly one of the big problems gets overlooked in terms of the masculinity, that bravery often gets conflated with this brand of romanticized misery. Also, that part about no space equals punishment, it's another one that hits hard for me, and it just seems like one of those ways that society is disproportionately harsh to people on the spectrum. It pretty much a contributing factor to one of my self-punishing depressive episodes. Now, don't get it twisted. I totally agree that ADHD or autism or any other form of neurodivergence shouldn't be used as an excuse for problematic behaviors, and I'm not expecting to be coddled or shielded from the consequences of my entire life. All I'm asking is we draw a fine line between holding people responsible and irrationally dogpiling people over every minute mistake or character flaw. And this is one of those things, great comment, this is one of those things that I feel really strongly about. I work with a lot of autistic people, and one of the things I say to them again and again and again is every social interaction that goes awry is not your fault. The thing about being diagnosed and having this awareness of being on the spectrum is this idea I don't understand social stuff, and so it must be my fault if something goes wrong. It's not. And that's why caring about somebody else's feelings is not the same as being responsible for their feelings, right? Like if somebody gets upset when you've been talking to them, yeah, care, find out what's wrong, right? And that, if you want an ongoing relationship with somebody, that's a good idea. But are you responsible for that reaction? No, you're not. And that's true as well of, I came at this from PTSD therapy. I hope people care about the various trauma triggers. Fewer and fewer, but a few have cropped up lately, and they were real. But, I hope, I expect the people I work with to care about ones that can reasonably be avoided, right? But they are not responsible for me dealing with them. That's my responsibility. Now, there's this fine line, right? Because it's one thing if somebody does something, it's a fairly common thing that happens to be a trigger. I'm not going to say it because assholes then start doing it deliberately. But if I say, like, this is a thing that bothers me, please don't, like, I just want you to be aware this is, this has a tie. And one person recently kept claiming they forgot. Once, okay, but multiple times, no. And that's the difference. If somebody keeps disregarding the things that you prefer, it's one thing if they slip and go, yeah, right, sorry, you did tell me that. That's one thing, right? Nobody's perfect. Everybody, don't jump on people for every little minute thing. I agree with the commenter. But if someone just seems really blasé about your needs, is this someone you want around you? I keep going back to that. And a lot of guys, because of that idea of romanticized misery, of, you notice all the comments of, it's just this constant onslaught and I have to function anyway. There's a different version of that for women. There's a comment I'm saving that'll get to that. But this idea that manhood is just romanticized misery is definitely something that has popped up in culture, and it doesn't have to be, at least not all the time, right? There should be good times, there should be bad times. If you constantly feel like it is an onslaught and you just have to keep pushing through a social blizzard, right? That suggests that some form of boundary violation is happening on a fairly regular basis. And you end up much happier if you figure out what that is and try to address it. And the nice thing about that, when you feel like you're constantly being deluged, right? You don't have any resilience. It's not that you're not strong, it's that you're exhausted, right? And that's what I used to do. And so I had nothing left to weather various things. And when I started making sure I had, resiliency space in how much I was dealing with, wow, life got a lot more enjoyable. Time boundaries are important. Emotional boundaries are important. Physical and sexual boundaries are important. That sexual boundaries thing with men, we need to have a real serious talk about it. I know I've talked about how I don't use the term incel, because it upsets too many men who, either would like a partner or don't have one, or realize that dating right now is not right for them, and so they are voluntarily celibate. But it is undeniable that the term incel associates a lack of sexual activity with being lesser as a man. And that is super wrong. Like, super wrong. Like, bad for everyone. Like, can we stop doing this? Thanks. And I don't think, honestly, I think that is a big part of rape culture and rape myth that affects men that isn't talked about enough. Because why? Well, the idea that, it's flattering if a woman touches you in a way that you don't feel good about, or, make sexual comments towards you that you don't appreciate. Be flattered. No, you don't have to be. It's okay to feel demeaned, right? It's much harder for guys to say, hey, I don't like that. Please stop. And I do think we need to normalize that more. It's not okay. It grinds men down. And then, think about it. If you're saying if you don't engage in this activity, you're not a real man, but let's tell men not to rape. It's not contradictory messages, but it makes the acceptable behavior like the hallway's this big. So, err on the side of consent. You can't control whether someone's into you. Nobody can. And if they're not, oh well. easy to say. I know, but that's sort of the rejection immune state that you can get into. It's just rotten what we do to men collectively as a society that way. I've talked about this enough. Let's move on. This one's interesting. Every men's resource has pushed some call to action. It's usually some leftist guy telling me I don't have to be traditionally masculine all the time before listing all the hegemonically leftist things I should be doing, as if being a foot soldier for some political cause is the same thing as taking care of myself. That is well said. I don't think I can add anything to that other than there's been a lot of conversations about why people hate the left lately. And they're all completely valid. And the left isn't going to listen because it's too busy yelling at people. And that's why people hate the left. But there's no need to define I am increasingly not big on these identity labels. I'm finding them limiting more and more. So, yeah, great comment. There's some people said never really care, but let's go back to that comment I was saving. There's a comment I was going to read that has disappeared somehow. That's really weird. But, somebody said, this woman said, a weird analogy for the tension between men and women over this stuff. It's almost like we're engaged in a similar but not identical game with rules just different enough to create conflict and tension. Women are playing Night at the Museum, where the rule is to stand stock still whenever the guards might be looking at you, but there are no circumstances where movement is permissible. Men are playing red light, green light, where sometimes movement or action is appropriate and expected, but that can abruptly change. If you had a bunch of people in gym, half playing according to Night at the Museum rules and the other half playing red light, green light, you could see resentment cropping up on both sides. The Night at the Museum players might think, those red light, green light players get to move a lot more than we do. All this standing perfectly still is hard and boring. The red light, green light players might equally think, those Night at the Museum players don't have to risk moving if they don't want to. We have to move and risk that consequence. They'd both be feeling the situation as unfair, and they'd both be right. And I think that's a really good example of the where the grift gets into the gender talk, right? Because this whole idea that men have it great and women have it awful. Well, no, individual mileage may vary. And this whole idea that women are super protected by society and men just aren't. Men are just disposable. Well, individual mileage may vary as well, right? It is not that simple. We're dealing with a lot of variables. And I do think that the similar games, but and not being gender typical is kind of like, when you switch games and the controls are real similar, except like, how on Switch the back button is on the most right button. Is it A? I think A or B. But on both Xbox and PlayStation, it's the bottom button, A or X. And you keep messing up because your muscle memory would be perfectly fine on PlayStation, but not on the Switch. That's what being gender atypical is like. And the reason I used to like playing RPGs is I could play with more of my natural inclinations to problem solving that are rewarded very much in video games and punished very harshly by society. I'm not having that same experience with the dialogue wheel because, okay, this is weird and a huge derail, but it's funny. I try to pay honest compliments to people because people don't hear enough praise. And according to Dragon Age Veilguard, that's flirting. And this has really messed me up because, no, the dialogue writing is not great in that game, but am I sending signals I don't intend by being, I'm really glad you're here, and things like that? I mean, maybe it's the context, I don't know, but the flirting game in Veilguard is just, that's flirting nowadays is praise only exclusively reserved for when you want to get someone into bed. And I try to ignore the icon on it and just say what the text says, because I find the comedy face comments not funny at all, and I find the thumbs up, which I guess is like, yay, let's go, or like button comments, I find those more snarky. So I don't know what's going on, but anyway, that whole socialization thing, there's no correct socialization in one subculture is totally wrong in another. There's nobody who knows how to social perfectly. So with that, let's move on to Wellness Wednesdays. I haven't read the Two Women Talking comments yet. I admit I forgot to do that before this. I was rushing to get this video in. But moving on to, really thanks to Eileen for coming on. That was a really good conversation. It's nice that Two Women Talking is continuing. So the male role models on this one was really interesting. And there were a few people who said that the reasons, I say people are terrified of conflict exactly for the reasons I pointed out. So that's pretty cool. It made some people feel seen, which is nice. The what to do about that's a longer one. Maybe I'll do a Wellness Wednesday about that. I've got so many video ideas coming up. One tip I will give now is, if you conduct yourself fairly in arguments, so you don't name call, you don't leap to assumptions, you stick to what you can prove, you fight fair. It is way easier when somebody else gets really mean to go, this is a them problem, not a me problem. And then it's like, do I want to continue this conversation? Yes, I'll give them a few more chances. No, I'm out. Right? If you focus on what you're doing and realize you can't control what the other person did, and you didn't make them do that to you, it's way easier to go, okay, well, that wasn't on me. Especially when people start with the damn accusations. Nothing sours me on an argument more than someone insists I had negative intent somehow. And this is kind of where, in my opinion, I'm not that smart. I don't have the time or the brain power to scheme about how I can manipulate and fuck someone over, right? When I was doing the crowdfunds and sending out t-shirts, they told me to estimate a weight for the shipping labels, and I couldn't do it. I needed an actual number. It's just making something up and remembering what you made up is just too much work. I'm not that, I'm just not, my brain can't, right? I got too much going on. Yeah, that conflict, it's tough. I used to be terrified of fighting, so I feel you. No, really, really, I was. I know, that's funny. Anyway, moving on. Someone said, that's something I really needed to hear. Totally agree that non-familial male role models are just as valid. It's especially helpful when you grow up with a father who's either abusive or barely present. It's like the old joke goes, I'm not your stepfather, I'm the father who stepped up. I like that. I also agree that we do need to start championing kindness in men because, again, it feels like kindness tends to be conflated with weakness. And I don't mean in the nice guys finish last, only girls only want bad boys way. I generally mean that a lot of people tend to believe that being kind means being soft, which genuinely isn't true. Another symptom of the man box. I want to talk somewhat in depth about that because, yeah, there's a reason I separate nice and kind. Because kind sometimes is getting tough with somebody because they're making an ass out of themselves. You know, the example I use all the time is if your buddy's fly is down after he's used the bathroom, you know, it's going to embarrass him to tell him, but it's a kindness because otherwise he walks around with his fly open for God knows how long, right? It's that kind of thing. And a lot of people will let somebody do the social equivalent of walking around with their fly open. And that's how I feel when I find out somebody's been lying to me for a really, really long time, that I give people the benefit of the doubt until I have reason not to. And if they are not correcting me on something, they are letting me walk around with my fly open, because in this day and age, people assume that sincere mistakes are lies. And so if I'm walking around based on inaccurate information and it somehow comes out that it was inaccurate, well, people are going to assume that I'm lying, not that I just was misinformed. And that has happened to me so many damn times. And I am so sick of it that's why people who lie to me long term or frequently, if I catch just somebody in too many pointless lies, like when it would be better to tell the truth, they're gone. Because no one has a perfect reputation. But with what I do, trust is so important that I can't afford to jeopardize that. And I can't afford to jeopardize the fact that you guys trust that what I tell you is not just what I sincerely believe, but it's not half-assed, right? I've taken a bit of time to look into it. One person said one of the male role models I had growing up was Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek The Next Generation, man of science and culture who favored diplomacy over violence while being quite capable of violence if the situation called for it. Picard over Kirk, 100%. I am a Luke over Han girl, and I am a Picard over Kirk girl. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying it is true, right? But I always like the more man of science, the guy who does all the work. Like season 1 of Arcane, Victor, better than Jace. Okay, Victor's still better than Jace. But I also thought Silco was better than Vander because Silco was fucking consistent. And I feel the same way about Solus, but I'm going to finish the game, and then Eileen and I are going to have a talk about that. Maybe it'll be 2 women talking. I don't know, but Team Solus right here. But this is an interesting one. We're talking about archetypes, because one person said, having grown up in the Christian church, I say we have more than one role model of masculinity. We have Jesus, Peter, John, and Paul. They're different types of men with their strengths and failings on full display. So biblically, we should have a few different ways to be a man. And I guess this is different in like the Catholic and Protestant traditions. And I mean, in the sub-denomination, the subcategorizations of both, especially Protestantism, I guess it varies very wildly. So thank you for adding that, because obviously I don't know. I looked up specifically Peter as a role model and some of the interpretations. Because there's like that story where Peter goes, hey, Jesus, what's up? Right? Like, why are you doing this? You don't know this is going to happen. I mean, in hindsight, he just told, an aspect of God his business. And that's the whole point. Like, dude, what were you thinking? But he was trying to be a bro, right? He was trying to be a good friend. And instead, Jesus calls him Satan. But it's interesting because the interpretation that I read is Peter being somebody who can have great insight, but also lack understanding in other things. He can be incredibly wise in some moments and clueless in others. And I mean, I predominantly knew Peter from the story about the denial of knowing Jesus, right? But there's obviously more to him. But one of the things I said is that Peter, I'm reading from this article, Peter is just like any of us. His words often reveal how he thinks should be rather than how they must be. And maybe that's why I don't get the Christian frame on things. Again, people have to explain Has Been Hotel to me and Hell of a Boss. But I would change it to people's words often reveal how they think things should be rather than how they are. How they must be, to me, is no different than how they should be. It's just, they are. Like I said, I'm a Picard girl, not a Kirk girl. I'm not saying that's better. I'm just saying it is very, very strongly. I don't like I've never liked the bad boys. I never have. And people say I'm lying. Why would I lie about that? Like, what? This is like, you're lying. All women want that. It's like, what would be the benefit of me lying? Like, what? Oh, so I'm lying to attract a bunch of guys who I'm not interested in. It doesn't make, and I am more into the bad girls, but the bad girls that have fun, not Jinx or Vi. Oh my God. Again, there will be thoughts about that. But it's so weird that when you defy what should be, people punish you for it to the point that it does become a knee jerk, like what Peter did. Like, come on, think on the bright side, bro. You don't know what's going to happen. To Jesus. And Jesus, like, Jesus goes full Sam Jackson or like Kevin Hart, just like, I won't do it because I don't want to blaspheme, but, it just, yeah, duh, we all have them. And I do think that having these figures that either did important things or were good people, we can debate the whole, again, good person as opposed to you are a good person because you consistently do good things. You are not inherently good. But, having those role models that are still flawed so that we accept our own quirks, some of which are not flaws, some of which are. We can accept our flaws and want to work on them, right? We can say that I need to work on this because it's making me unhappy without equating it like the worst bloody thing in the world, the way both the left and the right try to do. The left is everything's genocide. The right is everything's pedophilia. You know what I mean? And sometimes they switch. But yeah, that's not healthy, right? And so, I mean, having a debate about religious figures and, archetypes or like mythological creatures, like somebody brought up who was it? Another comment that disappeared. What the heck? Why is this happening? Weird. Anyway, somebody brought up like a woman from Antigone. That's right. Okay. Antigone would be the medical definition of toxic masculinity, right? So And I mean, Vi from Arcane. Toxic behavior. Oh my God. But it's like, oh, she's strong because she fights things and she drinks a lot and she's miserable and romanticized misery right there. I'm so sick of it. People with real problems, please. Not that she doesn't have real problems, but my God, she creates so many for herself, right? Let's not do this. And that, that doesn't mean the character can't exist. I just like a little more awareness of the fact that she's a fucking disaster, man. Anyway, let's move on because we're over time. I do like how people shared so much in the comments. That those are my favorite comments. Because one, I read them so people can feel heard. People can feel seen. Hopefully people can feel at least partially understood. That is very, very important to feeling accepted, but building your sense of self as well, right? And I would like to figure out, this is why I wanted to do the groups for people to just kind of talk, but they've been notoriously difficult to organize. So we've been doing our best. There was a lot of like really cool conversation on the Discord as well. Some guys just kind of jumped into audio chat as well on International Men's Day to talk. So I was like, did I miss something? Was there? Oh no. Okay. I saw some guy just like, hey, I'm going to be in general if anybody wants to talk, and that's cool. Okay, so I think one of the mods got in there too to keep an eye on it. So I appreciate the mods. I need to say it more. But they all get shy when I say I appreciate them. But maybe that's because they're all playing Veilguard, or half of them are playing Veilguard. And that's flirting in Veilguard. I'm still messed up by that. Just paying an honest compliment is not flirting. There's gotta be an intent. And I guess, yeah, the heart's there, but I pick the option and then see the heart, and it's like, I hate the dialogue wheel. Right? Like, the dialogue wheel just, I feel so boxed in. I feel like the game is constantly judging me. Oh, this seems like a cool response to do. What do you mean that's the sad response? Or what do you mean that's a tough guy response? That's just, like, so many times my typical, like, just neutral comment is the tough guy response. And it's like, I'm accidentally flirting and I'm an accidental asshole. What the fuck? Right? Anyway, I'm rambling. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching Feedback Friday, and have a great weekend.